Hello. As I said initially, I was going to do 3 videos on 3 of the books I've written. Although America, I get pretty enthused when we start talking about America. This one might run long, or maybe I'll have to do it in 2 parts. Anyway, America, what the hell went wrong is where we're going to start. And the initial quote in here is from Thomas Jefferson. Educate and inform the whole mass of people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. The first part of America goes through the history of Europe, where the founding fathers learned their lessons of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. I covered the birth of Christianity, Emperor Constantine, the Catholic Church, Islam, the 100 Years' War, Martin Luther, who I consider to be really the first founding father, 30 Years' War, early exploration of the continents, and the early colonial wars. We fought 12 wars before the Revolutionary War was fought. In 1500, the only Bible was the Great Bible in Europe, and was primarily in the churches. And then in 1579, the Geneva Bible was released. It was the first Bible taken directly from Hebrew text, the first Bible mass-produced, and the first Bible available to the general public. However, the Geneva Bible was contrary to the Great Bible. The Geneva Bible is the first Bible to have verse citations and summaries before each chapter as to what the chapter was about, and some of the margin notes were at odds with the theology of the Church of England. So King James I in 1603 commissioned the writing of the King James Version, and he instructed the translators to use the King's English, because he wanted people to be aware of the thee and thou, although they were reading the Word of God. Historical revisionists continue to rewrite our history based on their agenda and the overall objectives that they're trying to achieve. Unfortunately, most Americans have their knowledge of history from entertainment, movies, TV shows, the mainstream media, other things that can be of dubious accuracy, and this push to get God out of society, when that was the basic foundation of this country, moves them to try to portray our founding fathers as deists, rather than the profoundly religious men they really were. And that becomes obvious as you read some of the state constitutions. Early settlers were escaping the religious persecutions from the Church of England and from the Catholic Church. If you were a Protestant or a Lutheran and your views were contrary to the Catholic Church, then you were a heretic and could be burned at the stake. The Puritans gave up trying to purify the church, so they came to America, and the separatists wanted to completely separate themselves from the Catholic Church and the Church of England, and that's why they founded New England. The original 13 colonies, they were 98% Protestant, 2% Catholic, and about 200,000 Jews. As Martin Luther had said, he wanted everyone to have their own Bible, read for themselves, and form their own personal theology based on their conscience and the illumination from the Holy Spirit. He didn't believe that you had to be saved by a church and a priest or a pope or a bishop. Every settlement in America had a schoolhouse because every child was taught to read so they could read the Bible for themselves. The literacy rate in the colonies was 70%. In the rest of the world, it was 0 to 40%. The King of England also wanted to stake a claim in North America because the Spanish and the French were already here, and so he wanted to get his share of the pie, if you will. On November 11th in 1620, the Pilgrims, who were members of the Separatists, landed on Plymouth Rock. They came on the Mayflower, and they didn't land where they were supposed to land, so they weren't under a charter from England. So they wrote their own. It's called the Mayflower Compact, and which reads in parts, in the name of God, we the undersigned plant this first colony for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. The first colony, the going, was really tough. Half the people died through the winter of starvation, as they called it, and fought the 12 colonial wars before we were established. The French and Indian War was the last of those pre-revolutionary wars, and it's considered the war that made America America, because after that the French and the England no longer were primed for dominance in America. We had our own established themselves. After the French and Indian War, England wanted us to pay the war debt, and we had a war debt of our own. So that caused all kinds of problems. They restricted our trade. They wouldn't let the colonies that were under their governorship boycott America. Any goods that came to America had to come on English ships. Anytime we sent a ship out, it had to stop in England and be inspected. And then they still had troops stationed here, and we didn't think that there was a need for troops because we thought it displayed our ability to defend ourselves in the French and Indian War. And then the British troops went into the Boston Armory and stole all the gunpowder. And then they got word that they were going to do the same thing at Lexington and Concord, and that's where this whole Paul Revere and all this stuff started. And the Minutemen assembled at Concord or at Lexington, and they weren't going to let the British come and take their rifle or their muskets and their gunpowder and the lead they used for making bullets. So that was the shot heard round the world. At the end of that, one British soldier was dead and 5 Americans were dead, and which eventually would lead to 8 when 3 of them died from their wounds. The Battle of Lexington was in April of 1775. The Declaration of Independence was issued July 4th, 1776, 16 months into the war. And there were approximately 1,547 battles during the Revolutionary War. Most of them were minor skirmishes and didn't have much of an implication in the outcome of the war. The Constitution of 1787, the states ratified it in 1788, and the Bill of Rights was added in 1791. After the Battle of Saratoga, where Britain lost half of their army, and the Battle of Yorktown in October of 81, the British troops surrendered, and England conceded that America was a free and independent nation. Now the Founding Fathers had to set out about creating a new government, and as Ben Franklin said, of all the governments we've considered and all the nations we've considered, none of them apply for the cause that we have at hand. So I first want to talk about the American rifle, because how could a unregulated militia defeat the largest, mightiest army in the world at the time? I'm sure you're all familiar with the European style of battle, where troops get on line and they start marching towards each other, and then they start shooting with their muskets. And as they're coming together, the artillery are trying to eliminate the number of people, and they're trying to eliminate the ranks as they close together, because the real element of battle in these situations was the bayonet. A 17-inch bayonet on the end of your rifle. When you got into close quarters, that's where the real fighting happened. That's because the smoothbore muskets were so inaccurate. They might fire 80 to 100 yards, but at 80 yards you would miss your target by 3 feet. So that's why they had these battle strategies developed the way they were. The problem was, in America, we had a lot of frontiersmen. We did a lot of hunting, and we needed something that would be accurate for long distance and one shot. So American rifles were born, sometimes called the Kentucky long rifle. They have a helical grooves or spiral grooves down the barrel, which exerts torque on the imparting spin on the bullet, or the projectile, which stabilizes the projectiles in flight longitudinally, improving aerodynamic stability and accuracy as the bullet picks up spin by going through the grooves. So the British would line up, the Americans would line up, and as they started marching, they were easy range for our soldiers. So the marksmen would start dropping them as soon as they started walking, and virtually annihilating the soldiers before they could get there. They could take their cavalry off from distances. And a lot of the history books always want to say that the Americans broke and ran. They were cowards. Truth of the matter is they didn't have bayonets. Our Kentucky rifle didn't have bayonets. So when the British got close enough for their bayonet charge, the colonists would break formation, gather into the woods or wherever, regroup, and continue to pick them off one by one. It was really a war of taxation and a matter of trying to confiscate our firearms. So when the Founding Fathers set out to establish a government, the United States of America was not built on the Constitution alone. It was built on a firm belief in the providential hand of God and the teachings of Jesus Christ. The Federalists believed that a government built on morality and religion was the surest safeguard against men acting in their own self-interest, as each person is accountable to God for their actions, and there is a judgment day for rewards and punishments. The Constitution declared the origins of the natural rights and instituted a form of government where our divinely granted rights could not be compromised by mortal power. When they talk about the Founding Fathers and America being deitist and created by criminals, yeah, they were criminals because they were escaping persecution, but most of the preambles to the Constitutions make it pretty clear the intent of the colonies and the individual states. For example, the Pennsylvania state constitution, each member before he takes his seat shall subscribe, I do believe in one God, the creator and governor of the universe, the rewarder of good and the punisher of the wicked. And I do acknowledge the scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be divinely inspired. Now, if you didn't agree to that, if you wouldn't make that pledge, then you couldn't hold office. I think maybe the desire of the Founding Fathers was to establish a government under the control of the people with enough checks and balances so that no agency of government would hold unchecked power. The government should be sovereign enough to maintain security, justice, civil order, and provide an environment for individual prosperity, but not enough power to abuse people's rights. The specific role of American government was to secure these unalienable rights for the governed and to ensure that they were never abridged, that each person possesses inherent dignity, value, and freedoms from which the government ought to protect. I guess that could do it. It goes on to explain the challenges we had, and the real challenge that is presented to American government was Charles Darwin. When he came up with his theory of in 1859, when he published The Origin of Species, the theory of evolution is unproven and unprovenable, and I take a chapter to make that claim. The only reason it exists is because the people that don't want to be accountable to God, now they had an excuse. Under the theory of evolution, there is no God, so a person can do pretty much whatever they want as long as they're not held accountable to a higher authority. So that was their basic undoing, and then the courts and the legislators kept pushing God further and further out of our culture, out of our society, so it became less of an issue. And to restore America, we have to go back to the beginnings of the Founding Fathers' original intent for the Constitution and not do away with it or rewrite it as the liberals suggest. Anyway, the books are Just War, A Soldier's Revelation, Things to Come, A Brief History of the Bible, in America, What the Hell Went Wrong. And the books are available on Amazon. And where this goes from here kind of depends on the comments I receive. So thanks. I appreciate you watching.